and it was very, very interesting. You guys were talking so far over my head that it was hard to keep pace.
Yeah, it's I mean, it was an interesting new technology then, and I guess we did the right thing. We used big data technologies for your traditional data. We were not into big data, but we liked the new scale out technologies under the big data. And for some use cases, not all, you could help things like Oracle with it. But yeah, these were interesting times. But now it's like now nobody cares about that big data anymore. Now everybody talks about AI. So there's a new hype.
AI needs big data. Hey, Roger, part of your other screen is creeping in on the recording. So if you could just slide it.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, sorry about that. I had to take care of some housekeeping things, like I grilled myself a couple of nice fillets for lunch, and I just noticed I hadn't put the cover back on the grill yet.
Okay.
I have like a separate little house, or like a guest house where this recording studio is, and but when I don't do any of this live stuff, then I don't visit this house often. And but today when I came in, I saw that my air conditioner was leaking, so I had to also do some quick troubleshooting.
That, and I also had to put away a bottle, because if I leave it out, I will drink it. A nice Macallan 25.
I just have a can of Coke Zero, so but often I have a beer in hand when I'm done with like a full week of work or something, and whoever is the lucky or unlucky person whom I speak to last on a Friday, they will see me drinking already.
Well, that's kind of like, one time I got a call from HR and I was asked, "Did you call this person stupid?" I said, "No, I asked them if they were stupid."
Yeah.
And you want to know something? On a Friday, yeah. But it's Tuesday, or is it Wednesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah, I don't even know anymore. I just open my calendar and see what's next.
It's already been a long week for me.
Yeah. So I was gonna, like, I mean, when we talked like 2 weeks ago, I was gonna like play the previous episodes. I opened the page but I never actually got to play any of so. But I'm totally fine with any format. It's even better. I haven't even prepared anything. So and like,
we have some trick questions for you. So and Rob has to read you your rights. There was a program that we used to watch as kids. And they would say, the stories you're about to hear are true. The names have been changed to protect the innocent.
and in the United States, your Miranda rights includes you have the right to remain silent.
Yep. It's like,
anything,
next question, please.
Anything you say can and will be used against you.
Yep.
I've adapted that. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be twisted to be used against you.
We're not usually that rough, but we do have a few trick questions for you. But I'm sure you've we look at your background. This is what I do basically. Look at your background, some things that you have published, and then come up with some questions that sound like they'll be interesting to our audience. And of course, we always like to pick folks' brains for their interesting war stories, or things that have happened in the professional world that were, say, unexpected, but you got a good learning lesson from it. Because really the idea behind the Graybeards war stories is to share content, share ideas, encourage people and even new people to the field and that type of thing. So and I know you've done a lot of work with your training classes and so forth and public appearances, so we definitely appreciate having you on. And I have a short intro. I usually keep this splash slide up just for until I'm done with the intro, and then I'll click off of that, do the intro, and then we just start the free-flowing approach.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have some stories, or we use this term hobby horse, so that's things that really interest you that you want to talk about, just launch straight into it.
Yeah. that's actually this part I did like think about a little, but now that you mentioned, I'm just writing a little list of keywords so I can, so yeah, I do have, good stories, and let's see in which direction this goes.
Well, and also one other thing, I like talking about our screw ups. We're at the age now where our ego is not in the way anymore.
Yep.
And if younger people can hear about the screw ups and how we laugh about them now, maybe they won't be so embarrassed. Like the time I was in Barcelona and I was on a Zoom call. It was actually
a few months ago, right?
This was Barcelona, November 2021.
All right.
And so it's far enough back that I'm laughing about it now. But I was on a Zoom call, but I was using AWS's version of Zoom. I was on my tablet. The meeting was taking place in California, and I'm in Barcelona. 12-hour time difference. I can't remember what it is, but it's midnight in Barcelona. I'm typically in bed at 9. And so I'm like going, I'm just going to climb into bed and keep listening to this. I wasn't providing much to it. So I start getting undressed and I get in bed and I'm sitting there in bed and I get a text message a few minutes later. Rob, your camera is on.
Yeah, I know where this is going. Well, I don't know.
So, and it was a woman sending it to me. Now, everybody on the call was over 40. I'm 62, about to turn 63. Nobody in that call had never seen a guy in their 60s sitting on the bed in their underwear. They have led a very sheltered life, but at the time I was absolutely embarrassed. And I remember
he was broke the tablet.
Well, the thing is, because I wasn't familiar with AWS's version of Zoom, I'm trying to figure out how to turn off the camera. Then finally I take the tablet and I just go like this and slam it down. And my wife is like going, "What's wrong?" And I'm like going, I'll tell you later.
Yeah, it's that's why I have an external camera. I can turn the camera off, or I even can put this this thing back on. And I also have for my microphone. So let's see if it works. So I have a little button which I press, and it should mute me. Let's see if it does. 1, 2, 3, 4, 10, 11. So was there a gap?
So
there was a gap.
At 10. We heard you back at 10.
Yeah, okay, very good. Yeah. And there is this little thing switch has a red light on it, that when the red light is on, then I'm on mute. I configured it that way so that I would never start blabbing while on mute, because the red light will tell me it's right in front of my face. But you don't notice it after the first few days. You don't notice it. So there have been plenty of times in my training and whatever, then I just blab and blab, and then luckily somebody tells me 2 minutes in that, hey, maybe you should unmute yourself.
Yeah, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a coffee cup that says you're on mute, and I'll just hold it up.
Right. Hey, we got 2 more Zoom participants come in, so I'll do the intro and then we'll roll. How's that sound?
Works for me.
All right.
Okay. Hi, I know at least one guy, Metin. Hi, Metin, from the attendees.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this 8th podcast of Graybeard's War Stories from the Technical Trenches. It's my pleasure to introduce our guest today, a true master of performance in the tech world, Tanel Poder. Tanel has an incredible career spanning nearly 3 decades, helping customers around the globe solve complex performance problems and implement full stack observability and reliability strategies. But beyond his impressive technical skills, Tanel is a computer performance geek with a passion for understanding the inner workings of complex systems and building and fixing enterprise data systems with a systematic approach. He's also an entrepreneur, co-founder of Gluent. And I believe I heard from Martin that you're currently working at Google. Is that correct?
So everybody from Gluent is working at Google now,
Okay.
except me, because I was kind of like an outside advisor slash strategy guy for the last few years, last couple of years in Gluent, and then I needed to take a break from all the, I needed to reduce the amount of my workload, but also Gluent sort of switched into a different mode as well, because we went from 0 to 60 to build the team, the product, get the first enterprise customers and so on. But at some point, then the enterprise sales grind begins. That it's less about building the product, but it's more about getting the product out there in front of many customers, and the long sales cycles and so on. And so at some point Kerry took over as the CEO, and I become like an advisor, right? And when everybody joined Google, then I made the calculation and I said, hey, I'm just going to keep doing my thing. I'm going to cheer from the sidelines and advise as needed.
Okay. Well, I can also say that your expertise is unmatched. You have the author of several books, as I understand, on performance optimization, and co-author of the Expert Oracle Exadata book, as well as you've created a popular advanced Oracle SQL tuning, advanced Oracle troubleshooting, and Linux performance troubleshooting training courses. And you're also a sought-after speaker and trainer and advisor, and we're honored to have you here with us today to share your stories and experiences with the tech world. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Tanel. Thank you.
Hey, thank you. So thanks for having me here. And, it's, the previous names are really good here in the list. So I'm happy to continue the, the graybeard tradition, I guess. I don't know, I didn't even trim my beard. I do have a little bit of gray, so I guess I qualify now.
And John was joking with you on Twitter, saying that you were in diapers when he was doing his first $B queries.
Yeah, possibly. I don't. Maybe not. Maybe I was out of diapers probably for a few years already. But I was still running around in the local forest or whatever, playing war and stuff. I'm sure. Not really thinking about computers or girls or anything like that yet.
That changes. You start thinking about computers and girls. That's what we do.
Yeah, indeed. So.
Hey, Tanel, I got a question for you really quick. What country are you from? I can't place your accent.
Okay, so I'll give you like a few, a little bit longer story. The country is Estonia. 1991, we regained our independence again from Soviet Union when it collapsed. And that's where one of my, I have blogged about it. There's a joke about it, that the reason why I'm good at troubleshooting stuff is that when I was a kid, when JB was already querying $V views, I was still playing with toys, right? But Soviet Union, the quality of things was never good there. Everything was broken and so on. So whenever I got a toy to play with as a present, I first had to fix it. And then I could play with it, right? So like I said, for me, there have been some personal benefits from this history, right? So, but yeah, Estonia. But I've lived in, I have this little bug in me. I always want to go further. I want to see like more and more. So when I was like 20, then I moved to Sweden. But I worked there for a year. But that was a little boring. I didn't have any friends there. Stockholm was a little boring for me at the time. They didn't let people as young as 20 years old, they didn't let them into nightclubs, right? And bars and stuff. So, but anyway, so then I moved to London, and later on I contracted there. And then at some point I met my girlfriend, also from Estonia, in London, and she's my wife now. And then we decided to move to Mexico, to Cancun. And that's when I was going to write the book. I was going to write an Oracle performance book, back in 2004 or 5, right? And but we went to Cancun, and 3 weeks after moving in, or 3 weeks after getting there, Hurricane Wilma went through Cancun, and we didn't have windows, we didn't have water, we didn't have like anything, and then the guys told that, hey, you're not going to have any of that for a few months probably. So then we just took our backpacks, I put my like 2 laptops into the backpack and a few pieces of clothing, and then we just went backpacking, around the Central America and so on. So that was fun, right? So, and after that, we didn't feel like going back to Europe. We wanted to go further. Then we moved to Singapore, right? And that was like how we got to Singapore was this. So I sent my CV to one bank in Singapore, one in Hong Kong, and one in Shanghai, right? And the Singapore ones got back the quickest, right? So that's how we ended up going to Singapore, right? So, and after that, a few years in Estonia, but then we moved to US and Dallas, Texas, because I joined Kerry's Enkitech. Well, we together we started Enkitech Europe in Europe, which was like a fairly small or very small setup. I think we had like 5-6 people there in Europe, but all of them were, really, really, really good at their fields, right? And then, so that's how I ended up being in Dallas for 4 years. And then I followed my wife. My wife has something to do here some work to do here in Miami University, right? So then, 5 years ago, we moved to Miami, and that's what, that's where we have been for quite a while. And last year we became US citizens as well, right? So I guess now I'm an Estonian American, right? Not only Estonian who is in America.
To be an American. And I'm sure a lot of people would say, well, I'm whatever.
My father's a naturalized citizen from Ecuador. So my father is from Ecuador. And then, well, of course, this was many, many years ago, became a US citizen when he was in his early 20s.
I've been to Tallinn a few times. I love that city.
Yeah.
Especially the old city.
Yeah. It's a small place, but a lot of history. Like, that's the thing with US, like, I don't know what is the oldest building. Well, excluding the pyramids, right? But it's the oldest, like, house built here is 400 years ago or whatever. But, you go in Tallinn, we have like 1,000-year-old buildings, right? And then you go to Rome or Greece or whatever, they have like, they go further.
I think the oldest house I ever lived in was built in 1767 in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And I actually loved living there. But I can't think of any houses that are much older than that around here.
No, actually, I moved into a log cabin on our property, and that log cabin was built probably close to 200 years ago. But I have since moved into a proper house.
I'll give you and the other viewers later on. There's a little interesting data point from history that I found surprising as well. So in Estonia, in Tallinn, our capital, so there is a church, and about 500 years ago or 600 or something like that, that church is, the roof and, whatever, the tip of the church building, whatever you call it, right? That was the tallest, essentially it was the tallest building in Europe for I think 400 or 500 years ago, right? So because Tallinn was like because of it's next to the sea, it was a pretty important like trade route, and that's why I guess they had the church. But I guess it burned down a few times, so that every time they rebuilt it, then they took it a little easier. They didn't make it as high anymore. But one of the churches was the highest. Yeah.
One of my favorite cities is Sofia, Bulgaria. And the hotel I stay at right behind it is a church built in 200 AD by the Romans.
Wow.
And it's still in use today. And, I just find that amazing.
Pretty good engineering, right? I don't think my current house will stay up that long.
It's a round brick structure. I was like, a very simple structure, but they built it right. So
So Tanel, you started your career as a part-time C programmer, as I understand, and now co-founder of Gluent and a well-respected performance expert, you know, touching many countries over 5 continents. Can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you got to where you are today, and what have been some key decisions or experiences that have shaped your path?
Yeah, okay, let's do this. Yeah, so when I was thinking about this a little, that hey, what would I say, then I looked into, like, that when was the first time I like touched a computer, and then when was the first time when I did something like useful with it, other than just playing. And actually I did learn Fox Pro or DBase or something like that, one of those,
Yeah.
just local databases, right? So and that was 30 years ago. So I touched my first, I wrote my first lines of SQL, I guess, or whatever the query language was, I don't remember, 30 years ago. So but then when I was in high school, then I was already doing some part-time C development work. I wrote some web UI things in C, using the CGI, web server backend. Nobody would write web UIs in C today, but 27 years ago or whatever it was, that it was a different time, and that was on Linux by then, right? So yeah, so I got that, like, I got interested in computers and electronics and all this kind of ways to make, how can we make machines work for us, right? So I got interested in this at very young age, right? And then I guess in my before high school, whatever the school is called in US, what comes before high school, like elementary, right, or something.
Yep.
And then we had like a computer class, but these computers had Windows, MS-DOS, and later Windows as well. And of course, everybody started playing games there. That whenever they had like free time, they played games. So that was fun, but it was kind of waste of time in a sense. I did some hacking already as well. I was looking into assembly, interested in how viruses work and so on. But when I went to high school, I went to a different school for high school. The computer teachers there were, they took, instead of buying these 2 old 286 computers or whatever, for the computer class back then, they actually used that money to buy one 386 computer, and they installed Unix on it, right? Linux wasn't really, Linux was still in the infancy, but they had a SCO Unix on it. And then they scored a bunch of, I guess some schools from Finland or something, they donated a bunch of terminals, right? So that, instead of having 286 computers, which people mostly use for playing games, they had a 386, and they connected like 20 terminals to that single computer, right? So which allowed a lot of people, to do stuff with it, right? And since there were no graphical games, then people, what else are you gonna do? You're just gonna start writing code or whatever. So I think that was like one of the early important moments in my professional life, that I got into Unix and later on Linux quite quickly. And then I understood what a good multitasking and secure operating system should look like, right? Because people who spent 7 years playing with Windows and games and so on, you don't learn the same things what I did, right? Yeah, the C development, so I don't think that's too important. I wasn't very good at it because it's easy to write like 20 lines of code, but when your program becomes bigger and it's going to be 2,000 lines of code, then you better think it out beforehand, like modularize it and have it like properly modeled so it doesn't end up spaghetti, right? So I didn't have that knowledge, so my code ended up spaghetti quite quickly. So that's why I wasn't very good at it. And in general, it looks like my brain is better for, like a software developer takes a lot of small pieces of information and puts it together into one final product.
Mhm.
But my brain is better for taking this, whatever this bowl of, unknowns there is, and pick it apart and tell you this is wrong, this is the reason why something is wrong, So either you construct something or deconstruct something. So yeah, that was the beginning. But then when I went to the university, maybe it's worth saying, I'm not bragging about it, but I got into university, computer systems, something, but I dropped out after like 5 months or something, because I'm a practitioner, right? I can learn, and I will learn things that I need to know for the next task at hand. But at the school, I couldn't just sit there, learning about theoretical things which I couldn't connect to something practical immediately, right? So, and then I realized I don't want to do this for 4 years, right? So I dropped out pretty quickly, and then I already had a job as well. Doing I was a junior Oracle DBA actually, but I learned pretty quickly. And what helped me to learn pretty quickly was the Unix knowledge, right? So I was given a CD with Oracle and some HP UX, machine, and install Oracle on it. And whenever something went wrong with some listener or some, whatever connectivity and so on, I already knew how to run tools like Trust or whatever to trace what this Oracle program was doing, so that I already had the foundation, that I knew how I knew how to use the operating system tools in addition to any of those, Oracle tools to troubleshoot things, right?
Interesting.
So yeah, so that's probably helpful. And that's
when I went to college, I had a similar experience because I was a forestry major, and I had dropped out of the forestry program when I was a second semester junior, and I started working as a carpenter, right? And then I went back to college for computer science primarily, so I wouldn't have to retake organic chemistry. This was like 1981. I had never actually even seen a computer, and I signed up for the computer science program. So the whole time I was there, the other kids in the class, because I was older, obviously by then, the other kids in the class, they had had programming or whatever in high school, and they were like, programming away like crazy. And I didn't even like when the professor said an editor, you have to use an editor to create your program. I'm thinking to myself, okay, in my paradigm, the editor is the guy who has the hat on, and his sleeves rolled up.
Yeah.
And I literally, for the whole time I was in the computer science program, I was like scared that I was just going to like fall flat on my face and not succeed. But then there was a point in time, like in the last year where everything just sort of lined up and clicked, and I think the very first one was writing the online debugger for the assembly language compiler.
Yeah.
And in assembly language. And then I was like, well, I didn't have any programs that I could debug. So I said, well, the program that I'm writing may have bugs in it, so I'll just debug my program with my program. No, this is not possible. You can't do this. And then I thought to myself, well, why not? And I tried it and it worked. And I found my first bug in my program with my own program. And I just kept on going until I debugged the whole thing.
Yeah, that is a good story. It's things get recursive fast.
Oh yeah. When I started, it was in the Navy on a system called VAST, Versatile Avionics Shop Test. The computer built into it was the Varian data machine with a whopping 8K of core memory, and you loaded the bootstrap by hand. So you had to flip dip switches to load the bootstrap. Yeah, then after that, I went on to, when I got out of the military, went on the community college. My father said, you're going to learn a skill or you're going to get out of the house. So I'm like, okay. So I, took computer science classes at the community college, switched over to Mary Washington College and George Mason University, studied mathematics and physics. I was going to be a university professor, be in the ivory tower. Then went on for my master's and I was like, I'll try computer science. And then I realized I could do a lot better financially if I actually went into industry. And from there is like, now I study literature at Oxford. So
here's another story, and that is in the mid 80s, I ran Oracle version 4 on an 8086 machine with an 8 megahertz clock speed in 640K of memory. And I had to upgrade that machine from 112K of memory and a 5 meg hard drive. So we were rocking when I upgraded that to a 20 meg hard drive.
Yeah, so now like, the current numbers are like, you have like 1 million times more memory, right? So I just upgraded one of my lab machines from 192 gigs to 384 gigs, right? So it's kind
and the clock speeds are in the gigabytes, not or gigahertz,
gigahertz.
Not megahertz.
Yeah.
So you have an impressive training program and videos with structured learning approach that's consumable via video, and as I understand, you split the topics into various levels of complexity. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you came up with that approach and why it works so well?
Yeah, so maybe the history is that as a short history, I think I did my first training course, which was not my class. I mean, I actually worked for a company. My first IT job, like full-time IT job, was in Estonia 27 years ago, whatever, or in the end of 90s, right? So I started as an Oracle DBA, junior DBA, but I learned quickly because I was interested and I had the tools and previous skills to kind of I didn't only use Oracle tools to learn about Oracle. I was able to use Unix tools as well to examine what Oracle was doing there and so on, right? And I actually delivered some Oracle DBA classes, Oracle educations classes, and Oracle backup and recovery and so on in the end of 90s already, right? So. But I wasn't like a very expert yet, but I was able to go through the material and then and even reason when something went wrong, what happened, right? So that gave me the speaking experience, right? So and other than the technical skills, then over the years you learn, especially if you can be in the same room with people, you see from people's faces whether you need to explain the topic some more, or you can stop and you can move on to the next one, right? And also, when you deliver a training class the first time, then people may ask you a question, and you answer that specific question how it was asked. But when you have done training for 10 plus years, then you see that, hey, actually, even though they asked this question, what they really meant is that right? So that's the skill you get over the years of speaking at conferences and so on, right? So I guess that has been helpful, that I've been like doing training stuff for so long time, right? But then at some point of time, then I realized that, hey, I have like, let's say in the year 2002, 2003, something like that, there was a lot of misinformation about Oracle out there, and Oracle's tools were not that great yet, like especially before Ash was introduced and stuff like that. So there was a lot of misinformation, but there was also a lot of information out there that whoever was willing to look for it, that about the internals of Oracle and about tools, like Aura debug this and that and so on. Nowadays you don't need to use that, because Oracle's built-in instrumentation is so good, Ash and everything, SQL monitoring. You don't need Aura debug every other day, right? But back then, when you ran a big enough database, you did need Aura debug every other day, right? So do some process state dump or whatever, because there were no $V views or traces, documented traces that would trace what you wanted, right? So my first training idea was more of like a seminar. It was a 2-day seminar, and I still packed like 5 days worth of material in there, unfortunately. So, and it was called Oracle. Actually, it was called Advanced Oracle Troubleshooting, right? All the troubleshooting techniques, right? And then you know, I delivered it in multiple cities in Europe, and I traveled quite a lot. And it was useful. People found, you know, even though there was too much material, people found interesting, you know, gems from there, what they could use. But what was like a pivotal moment for me, that one of the attendees told me, like, hey, you know, that when they looked at you, when he gave the table of contents of my training or seminar, as it was then, when he gave the table of contents to his boss, his manager, to approve the training, the manager says, like, hey, you know, look, based on that, it doesn't look that useful for your job. And so that's when I realized, you know, that my table of contents back then was internals of latches, internals of mutexes, internals of this and that, or a debug, you know, capabilities. And, you know, that's very interesting to me and a few other people, you know, probably people who are going to watch these videos. But for everyday work, you know, for everyday work and troubleshooting, I mean, you shouldn't, like, not everybody has the time or will to cram 20,000 different undocumented events into their head, and then somehow link together that, hey, if I see this problem, then I have to enable this trace and blah blah blah. So that's when I realized that, hey, actually I need to take a different approach, a different angle to how I teach. Instead of the chapter 1 being internals of this and that and blah blah blah, it's more like this, that, hey, chapter number 1, how do you troubleshoot problems in general? Systematic approach, right? And chapter number 2 is, okay, if your problem is about NQs, this is what you do. Chapter number 3, if your problem is about you know, transactions and, you know, this is what you do. And if your problem is about too high IO, this is how you do, right? So that how do you drill down systematically into whatever symptom or whatever problem you see, right? So instead of bottom up, that, hey, let's memorize every single undocumented thing, and, you know, how many bytes or bits is this or that in a redo log file. I don't care about this anymore. I don't even remember many of these things, you know. But what I do remember very well is how do you approach the problem from the top? What is define your problem? What are your symptoms that you have measured? You know, don't guess. Don't tell me what you think is wrong. Tell me what you measured and what the numbers say. And based on what the numbers say, you know, what is the top weight event for your user or whatever, depending on that, you will decide if you go left or right, you know, and so on. So that's a long story. So this is, I had like a multi-year journey myself, to the point where I realized that, hey, a training should be like a systematic drill down by measuring things, by always measuring things. If you cannot measure, then, you know, you're guessing, right? Then you're not systematically troubleshooting. How do you drill down? By systematically, you know, measuring things and deciding based on what you see, where to go next. And I'll say one thing in the summary for that story, that you know, there is a game called well, this is now like I hope I get the names right. So there's a game called Scavenger Hunt, right? You know, Scavenger Hunt, right? But there is also a game called Treasure Hunt. So Scavenger Hunt is that, you know, you're given a list. You have to, you know, I mean, I'm sure you know, but you're given a list of, hey, you need to gather 10 items from this house or from the city or whatever. It doesn't matter in which order. And you know the 10 items up front, right? And when whoever gathers these 10 items the soonest, they will win, right? This is what you would do when you read an AWR or a StatSpec report alone. But but systematic troubleshooting is like treasure hunt. I don't know where I will end up. Treasure hunt is that you are given a clue that, hey, the first, you know, that you need to follow, you know, you need to go under this tree or whatever, dig a little bit, and you will find the first piece of paper. And once you have found it, and only once you have found it, that piece of paper will point you somewhere. Okay, so that the next piece of the treasure is under that, I don't know, I mean, somewhere behind the house or whatever, right? So then as a kid, you run there, and when you dig up that piece, you will find, you know, the next pointer. So systematic troubleshooting is like that, you know, that somebody comes to you, calls you saying they have a problem. you ask them saying, okay, how do you experience this problem? Please don't tell me what you think the problem is. Tell me what you try to do, and then what happened, right? How do you experience the problem? And based on what happened, then you start measuring that. And based on what your first measurements are, you decide what is the next thing you have to measure or check, right? That's the treasure hunt way. That's the systematic drill down, step by step. You cannot skip any steps, right? And then the learning part is that you have to, what should you measure? Then that's where the learning comes in, that you need to be aware that there is something called active session history. There are things called wait events. There are things, like SQL IDs, plan hash values, and you go deeper from there. Okay, I will be quiet.
That's a great metaphor. Actually, one of the things that I did in my work, which is in the book on anomaly detection, I've taken over tens of thousands of Oracle metrics that are collected every snapshot period, and I just sort of blast through them really quickly with a single SQL statement and have it flag up for me the metrics that are out of line. Basically the anomalies, not necessarily the high metrics in each interval, but the ones that were anomalies compared to a normal interval. So you have the problem interval and then the normal interval. And I use that sort of like maybe your treasure hunt approach, but I like your metaphor of scavenger hunt versus treasure hunt. That's a great metaphor.
Yeah, because the thing you have done is, this is again, like we can get computers work for us, and hopefully you will need a human to troubleshoot something systematically, 10 times less if you have another system in place which constantly measures what is the normal behavior for the system, right? And you can always, you can save time. You can save time. Hopefully when this system tells you, hey, that before you get systematic, this is what that doesn't seem right, So I'll tell you one story about or one more opinion, which actually goes together, which may change a little now, given that there is machine learning and anomaly detection is possible. But so one story is one story about systematic approach is this. So I went to a conference where I talked about a very complex problem we encountered. It was Oracle was running on HPUX, but at the end of the day, the problem was, the root cause was that Oracle had a bug. There were two items that collided and exploded. Oracle had a bug that whenever anybody logged in, Oracle wanted to create an audit record, an audit file in the audit dump test. There's this audit location. You have this .aud file, right? And normally Oracle only writes a file when you log in as sysdba or sysoper, right? Because when you log in as sysdba, Oracle will not insert any rows into a audit table, because it doesn't want to get hung if log writer is hung, right, or something like that. So, but Oracle had a bug that any user who logged in, even a regular app user, they created an audit file in this Unix directory. And this directory had 1.5 million files in it. And that particular, like modern Unix file systems and Linux file systems, like X3 and XFS, they index file names. You can have 1.5 million files in a directory if you want to, and you can still quickly look up a single file by its name, because Linux uses a little index tree in memory somewhere, to index the file names. But that HPUX file system, they did not use indexing. So when you had 1.5 million files, and Oracle checked if such an audit file with such a name already exists, because if it did exist, it wanted to add a suffix to it, so it would get a new file and so on. So Oracle did a lot of checks if a file existed, and since the HPUX file system did not have an index for file names in memory there, then you ended up having, you had like something like a full table scan through the whole array of file names, for that directory. And that's what drove the kernel mode CPU usage up. And then the connection pool created 1,000 more connections, 1,000 more, processes wanted to create an audit file at the same way, and they all ended up contending for a Unix level mutex, and so on. Anyway, so that was the problem. But I delivered a talk about it at a conference. That was like 15 years ago. And then somebody came to me afterwards saying, hey, but I troubleshooted it like systematically. We ran a profiler, which actually measured in the Unix kernel where the CPU was used. That's how we found out what was going on, right? But then somebody came to me and said that, but on HPUX, you could have run the SAR command, and SAR on HPUX tells you the number of directory gets per second or something like that. This guy had been done, Unix and HPUX for long enough that he knew the usual suspects, or he knew some of those typical issues which may happen. That you could have checked this particular metric in this particular tool, and if that's bigger than 5,000 per second or whatever, then that's what your problem is. And I said, yep. If you know what to look for, that yes, if you know that you have to look for this in such a scenario, then yes, it could have confirmed your suspicion. But this is only one problem out of this other 50,000 problems which may happen. And that's the issue. You don't only have 5 problems that can happen. You have 50,000 different problems which may happen in a complex system like Oracle or Unix because of bugs, sometimes, or because of, not bugs, just it's just how it is. And there is it's a suitable time to talk about it. So you see, we talk about graybeards, but there is another word called Unix wizard. There were Unix wizards which always knew off the top of their head what is the usual suspect, for this system. But being a wizard, Unix wizard and Oracle wizard, or whatever other engines wizard, that to me implies that you must have like 30 years of experience, and you don't have to use a systematic approach because you have seen 10,000 different problems, and you can guess a couple of times, and the third guess will be right? But this is not efficient. Like, think about all the new people. I know how many wizards are there, right? So, and even the wizard might get something wrong if there is a new problem or new type of a problem, right? And that's why
I never get anything wrong. My company was called Oracle Wizard.
but you do have 30 plus years of experience. And I've seen, I've done it myself. I've seen others do that as well. Sometimes hey, I know that it's so typical. This is very likely your problem because I've seen it a few times before. And that before we get systematic, before we call the sysadmin who has root access, before we run a kernel profiler or something like that, let's check these 2 things because they are the usual suspects, and it's very easy to check, right? So it's totally fine to check for some usual suspects before you start. But where I'm getting at with this is that luckily for all the businesses out there, when you have a systematic approach and like a method, and you have tools and data sources that support the systematic approach, so you will need wizards much less, right? Because there are not that many wizards, because you can just be systematic, not guess. You don't have to have good educated guesses, because if you measure the thing, go step by step deeper, the answer becomes obvious quickly. And then I'm not going to spend too much time blabbing more about that, but I think a great jump in Oracle systematicness was when Oracle introduced active session history. People did session level work before, right? Carrie Millsap, I learned most of this, mentality from Carrie Millsap. You can trace sessions and so on, that there is a method that instead of looking into system-wide utilization averages and doing some wizardry from there with your brain, instead of that, let's just measure the session of your user who complains, right? And let's break it down. Let's see what is the top timed event or wait event, and go from there, right? So Carrie, tends to use this method with Oracle tracing. But you can now use the same method with Oracle active session history, or even before active session history. You know, I've wrote something called Oracle Session Snapper, you know, that you can measure individual sessions and see where their time is going. So you can use the similar method with different tools as long as the underlying engine supports it, right? So we cannot go to Oracle 7 or Oracle 6 and you be super systematic with, because there is no ash, you know, and there are maybe not, the session level views are not there. So I'll finish this with that, that instead of two points, instead of looking into system-wide utilization averages, which these old school Unix wizards, you know, used to do, and then they did some magic in their head that only they could do, you know, instead of that, let's become systematic. Let's do the treasure hunt. Let's start from the problem, not some utilization of the whole system. Let's start with a human. What did it try to do? How long it took, and then what happened, right? And from there, you measure. You start peeling the onion. You measure the next layer, and you go deeper and deeper until you find you know, what you need. So the session level, connection level, or this end-to-end full stack instrumentation tools, if you have them in place, they all allow you to do that. You don't need wizards everywhere, and that's a good thing. You know, we wanna get some rest as well. So, well, I just called myself a wizard, but so that's the first point. But the second point is like a little despite what I just said, given that, you know, the improvements in machine learning and so on, you know, getting back to the anomaly detection things, that if you can have a computer with a GPU or something in the background constantly looking into, you know, both system-wide utilization averages, workload metrics, and perhaps some session level things as well, and it constantly does this wizardly or some sort of computing in the backend, and it can show you anomalies easily, you know, that it takes you one mouse click and you also see anomalies today, you know, that you know, I wouldn't discard that, because that may be a quick, you know, something that gives you some quick insight, you know, and you don't need a wizard for that. You just need a machine with a GPU, right, and the book or some source code.
Interesting. Yeah, that's a great approach. I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask about Gluent. So I'm very intrigued about Gluent's flagship product, which allows, as I understand, existing applications to query big data platforms without the need to be rewritten, if I'm understanding it correctly. So I was wondering if you could tell us where the product stands now and where you see it as the future, going in the future.
Yeah, so I won't give like super low level details, but I'll tell you this, right? So we you know, like we from the beginning we said, you know, we started when there was a big data hype, right? And we started we actually delayed starting Gluent by a year or something, you know, many years ago, because we saw that the market is not ready yet. There were no good enough big data products that would have suited our use cases. You know, there were things like MapReduce and there were things like Hive, but they were very, very high latency. You know, they were meant for actually running patch jobs, which take 24 hours or 7 days, you know, on this huge amounts of data. And that's not what we wanted to do. So we actually waited until we started Gluent. So we were ready to start Gluent when we saw that something called Cloudera Impala showed up, and that was a big data engine that also could do fairly low latency, right? And that's when, you know, so basically we ended up using the big data tools, but we were using it for traditional database workload, you know, enhancement, you know, so you could, that your you know, your 200 terabyte database could be only 20-30 terabytes, you know, with Gluent, because we offload 90% of the data away, and you don't have to change any code, right? So that was the main point, right? So it's practically impossible to rewrite your 20-year-old app that uses PLSQL, complex data types, and all this stuff. It's practically impossible to just rewrite that to an inferior engine, right? So that's why our point was like, we know that some part of the Oracle, database front end will still be there, but we can push the majority of your data to the back end, right? So, and like we built the team, we built the product, we launched it, we had like big enterprise customers, household names, Fortune 500, and everything. So we sort of proved out the technical possibility, but also at some point we realized that it's just because how the product, in order to build, in order to roll out, in order to actually sell or get the customers to even test the product, right? You have to convince people that you install a Gluent agent on your production server, right? And so on. For customers who knew us, that was easy, right? But for big companies, sometimes this ended up being a 1-year discussion. You go in front of architecture committee after another committee and so on, and it was just that it was despite initially moving faster, at some point we saw like, hey, this thing is going to take a long time, right? So that it would be better it would be better in long term to continue this strategy or continue this mission, maybe it's a better word, within the bigger company who actually has the resources. And then, a cloud company is kind of the like a holy grail in a sense, because you don't have like a 700 different customers with their own data centers and 700 different architecture committees to convince that you can test out our agent, our chill set and so on. Because in the cloud, I mean, you can roll out new products. You can roll them out at scale, right? You do it, you test it out, and you can roll it out globally, without any further convincing needed for regional administrators or something like that, right? So this was the thinking, and the result now is that everybody is at Google continuing the mission, right? So that's all I have to all I say, because there's contractually then I shouldn't really talk about too many details, right? So as I said in the beginning, yeah. So because I had been, in the end, I had been the kind of a like an advisor who was not, actively doing stuff every single day, right? Then when it was time to decide for me if I go or not, I decided that, hey, I need to rest a little longer. I need to take a little longer break, But I still, of course, talk to the team members and try to help out whenever possible. And it looks like it was correctly, it was a good move, right? So everybody seems to be happy, and they are doing awesome things there, right?
Excellent, interesting. Yeah, you touched a little bit on machine learning and so forth, and I was just wondering, with the rise of artificial intelligence and also language models like ChatGPT and similar technologies, and also the growing concern that they'll take jobs away from people. And I know, there's some jobs that people just don't want anyway. So
yeah. Maybe it's a good thing.
Too worried about that, but I was just wondering what your opinion is on the future of these technologies and the input and the impact on, performance problem solving and the job market and all those kinds of things.
Yep. So so I guess the surprise, I've been keeping an eye on machine learning myself, right, and the use cases and so on. And I was also, what is it? I guess the word is blindsided, that I was not, I was aware of GPT. I was aware of Google's transformer architecture, which the GPT is basically based on. That was, and it was all cool. But then a couple of years passed, and OpenAI realized, released GPT-2 or whatever it was, which actually was already, useful. So I was blindsided myself, in the sense that I did not expect something so useful to show up so quickly, right? So I thought it was like 10 years out. It was only like 2 years that they needed, right? So that's number one. So number two, before I answer your question, is it already is evident that predictably, people are already using ChatGPT a lot to quickly generate large volumes of garbage. So instead, so there is a guy, yesterday I read, there is a guy in Amazon who has published 40 books, self-published 40 books under his name this year.
40.
So 40 books under his name this year, because he did not write the book. He told ChatGPT, he pays like $20 per month, to the OpenAI, and he told ChatGPT, okay, now I want to write a book about this topic. Tell me what page 1 would look like. Okay, you get text. Tell me what page 2 would look like, right? It doesn't write there are like some limitations to the model, and then so on, that how long the input and how long how big the output can be, right? So I guess this guy wrote like, hey, okay, now write page 3 and so on. So this guy has 40 books, and when you browse it looks like, yeah, okay, so there is some text, but it's all garbage, right? It's all generic, garbage. So, and this will change some website. This will make internet even worse.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. And ChatGPT and also the Google product, Bird, what?
Yeah, Bard. Yeah.
Okay, they put in guardrails. I agree with guardrails, but if you're going to write a creative book, you have to take those guardrails down, because when ChatGPT was first released, I sat there and I go, how do I achieve world domination? ChatGPT said, no, we're not going to tell you.
Yeah,
that is against our programming.
Yeah, and there's like different guardrails. There's something like called fine tuning, and there is also OpenAI. Apparently, they paid to many thousands, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of people, I think in Kenya or somewhere in a low-cost country, so that humans would review some things as well. So it's not that's the thing. One thing is the ivory tower theory. But another thing is that now if you want to have a polished working product in the hand of everyday humans, right? So there is a lot of, so they actually have, used a lot of manpower as well, for polishing the final product. But like there is one thing, what happened was, so if you search for something called llama with 2 L's, LLAMA, right? So Facebook or Meta, so they, or let me just take a step back, right? So there are many companies who have published their open source machine learning, source code, basically, right? Or this is our machine learning source. If we just open sourced it, we are the good guys, right? But what the current, if you want to train something like GPT today, this requires thousands of GPUs, and the most powerful GPUs with the most memory, which can be interconnected with some InfiniBand and whatever. Thousands of GPUs, and training such a model, just the cloud costs alone are millions. It's like multiple millions of dollars just to train one model, right? So you're going to train a model at home, right? So OpenAI has released some source code. Others have released some source code, but nobody has released the trained model weights, that all the floating points, that are left in this multi-dimensional, hyperdimensional matrix, after training, they don't release that. It's almost like you release the source code of your database, but you don't release any data files, right? Where the data actually is, loaded, right? So, and what happened is that Microsoft also trained a model, a large language model. That's why the Llama has 2 L's, I guess, large language model. But unfortunately, it leaked somehow. So somebody uploaded wherever. So Microsoft open sourced the source code of their, model and so on. And somebody anonymous posted a torrent, hash or link to a comment, and everybody and there's no way back. So anyway, so nowadays, so you can, you can download this Llama inference code, and then you go to torrent and download like some 200 gigabytes of model weights from Microsoft, and you can actually run a GPT-like model at home on your GPU, right? So so because Microsoft has spent this millions of dollars to train this model, right? So, and that's when you can get That's when you can remove guardrails, right? That's what I was getting at. And the same thing is something similar is with image generation. So, OpenAI has DALL-E, DALL-E 2. But after that, there is a open source code base called Stable Diffusion. And the trained model, the weights of the trained model, it's not even 200 gigs. It's only like a couple of gigs. And that's openly available. So people generate images at home. And of course, now they generate porn at home, right? So you cannot do it online with the service with DALL-E because they have guardrails, right? But people at home, they, like what was the number one use case of internet, right? For wide audience, porn, right? So, well, you have the scientists in the ivory tower, but why the internet skyrocketed? Porn, right? So
Yep.
We did have a question that came up in the Q&A, and some anonymous attendee asked how to systematically troubleshoot when tools are limited in instrumentation. Say there is Postgres SQL at Cloud Vendor. So is sampling on the top the only option, or are you planning to expand your training to Postgres?
I'll get to that. How much time do we have? Do we have finish now, or do we have time?
We have as much time as you like. We normally go an hour, but we've had guests that continue on past the hour. So
I'll tell you one thing about the AI and the GPT, just to finish that part, and then I will go to the question. I actually have it on the screen, right? So when ChatGPT tells you an answer, it doesn't. It's not like Google search. It's not like search, where search goes to the actual source of information and shows you the exact source of information on your screen, right? That if you're lucky enough to actually find what you're looking for with Google search, the text you see on the screen is the actual text, what somebody wrote in their blog or whatever, right? It's actual correct, hopefully correct piece of information, right? So it's not like altered or modified somehow. But when ChatGPT, or when this language model gives you an answer, it hallucinates an answer. It's called hallucinating. So it actually does. It's not like it's not like it goes through a million websites and picks the top answer and shows you the exact top answer correctly as it was written by somebody a year ago. It's not that. The model is just a bunch of it's like a giant summary. It's like a giant summary, and the weight and the details in this model allow you to then extract, zoom into a specific location in this giant ball of information and extract some information out of there, right? But the extraction is not, it's just the relationships between tokens, parts of words, and so on. So that's when, when you ask a basic question about Oracle SQL from ChatGPT, you will get the correct answer because there is so much signal. The answer, the data set is simple enough, and there is so much correct signal that so the result will be pretty likely correct. But now when you try to ask something more complex, then sometimes the language model hallucinates an answer which is not even possible, right? That, hey, can I do something in Oracle what only SQL Server does, right? How do you create I don't know, I haven't tried that, but how do you create a clustered index in Oracle? In SQL Server you have a clustered index, which is actually like an IoT, right? So it converts the table to an IoT. But how do you do the same in Oracle? And then the hallucination sometimes is that, hey, all you have to do is, you log into Oracle with SQL, step number 1, log into Oracle with SQL Plus. Step number 2, type a command, create clustered index on this Oracle table. And this syntax does not work. But when you add all this, when you summarize all the information from the internet into this one giant, well, maybe I should say like array, and then you extract something, similar, your question kind of spans Oracle world and SQL Server world. Now the language, inference, the model, the part that generates text for you it will take a bit of Oracle info, it will take a bit of SQL Server info, put it together, and hallucinates you an answer that sounds totally plausible, but it's actually bullshit, right?
Yeah.
So language models are bullshit generators, right?
I've actually asked some questions, Chat GPT, and then I would say, "Oh, use this table, or this data dictionary table in Oracle." And I was like, "That
Yep.
data dictionary table doesn't exist."
Yeah.
I've definitely seen that.
And then you can ask a question and you get the wrong answer, and you can say, hey, this is wrong. I mean, are you sure about it? This cannot be right. And then basically, I'm probably explaining it wrong, but because let's say the Chat GPT, it remembers state of your previous discussion as well, or your current discussion. It basically can zoom in a little deeper, or it kind of like zooms into the adjacent best possible answer, right? So, and that's when sometimes when the first answer is wrong, you tell it's wrong. The next answer is, okay, yeah, I'm sorry, you're right, and it tells you the correct answer. So it's a bullshit generator, but it sometimes, for basic tasks, it's so good. So, and also what it's very good for is search. Like, I'm not only bashing Google search, but even the Bing search, and I use DuckDuckGo, DuckDuckGo.com or Duck.com as well. I think they have the new domain. Even their search has, like, internet search in general is pretty bad nowadays, right? So that half of the time you ask the question, you don't get anything relevant to your question on the front screen. You have like whatever the search engine thinks that you really want to see, right? So how I have used ChatGPT is that when I search with the search engine, I get the first page is like bullshit. I don't have time to kind of go through every link and see whether my information is actually there. I asked the same question from the GPT model, and it is able to. So basically, instead of me having to scroll through, this, well, let's make it into an example. I mean, you go to Oracle documentation, right? Oracle documentation is so verbose, and sometimes, I ask a question about some specific table caching attribute or whatever. The internet search engine takes me to Oracle's create table syntax page. Hey, just go to create table, where create table syntax is defined, and now scroll 50 pages down, and that's where your answer is, right? The language models can luckily do that work for me often. So that's where has been one use case.
Interesting.
The use case that I have used is to stub out code, give it a very good definition of what I want the code to be and what language. And for me, it stubs it. It doesn't give me what I would call, I wanted to say verbose, not verbose, enterprise quality code. However, it does give me a place to start. And then the other thing I started doing was pushing code to it and say, explain the code.
Yes. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the first point that, generate like templates or the high level, steps or the stubs, that's what I've used it actually myself as well. I decided to not bring it up because I've been blabbing for long enough, but that's actually a useful thing for me because, as I said right in the beginning, my brain is very good on focusing on this big giant ball of a problem, taking it apart, right? I deconstruct it and find where the problem is. But my brain, and perhaps because of that reason that I've done it for so many years, my brain is not very good at focusing on the opposite task. That I want to end up with a working website that does, integrated with this and that. And okay, what steps do I need? I get distracted really easily, right? And exactly, I have used ChatGPT for that. Okay, give me this piece of function for Python/Django, which allows you to upload a file to Amazon S3. Then it processes this file somehow, and then it sends the output. It shows the output on the screen in an HTML table, right? And it's I get the correct list of steps, right? And then I can work on that, and I lose focus. I don't lose focus as easily. Let's mention something about jobs as well. I mean, it's gonna be like like there are, especially in US, and like I noticed that I still very often have to call somewhere, like customer service, just to get something simple done or not, I guess, some improvements have shown up that nowadays you have Uber Eats and, this kind of apps where you can just use an app to choose what you want to eat, and then you order. You don't have to call somewhere anymore. But still, I find myself having to call places very, frequently. And I think the chatbots and this calling, like phone agents, whom you can call, they probably will get much better, but only for those companies who actually integrate their backend to this AI agent. So my one example was what the today's state is like. Every website, not mine, every website has a chatbot that annoys you today, right?
Oh yeah.
Like, hey,
Amen, brother. Can I
and
get
they
a
don't-
witness?
Yeah. And so the example is this. So I had to replace my tires, or one of the punctured tire of my car. And so the chatbot, I didn't call them, to the Toyota service, right? The chatbot showed up that, hey, can you, I can answer all your questions or whatever. So I typed in, okay, so how long is your service? I mean, for how long, when can I pick up my car? I knew my car was serviced, it was ready. And I knew the service was open until 5 p.m. or something. But I also knew that there was a cashier that was there until 8 or 9 or whatever. So you could pick up your keys, right? So that was my question, right? So I asked the question, how long are you open? It correctly told me that, yeah, we are open until 5 p.m. But the sales people will be there for longer. But when I ask a more specific question, like, okay, I know that everybody wants, people want to know how long are you open in general, but I want to know how long I can, pick up my car, from that cashier. And then, this chatbot was thinking something, and then said, oh, no, you have to call this number to actually speak to somebody, right? So it's like, so I hope that these chatbots get better, now that these language models support them, but they only can get better if the office or the company or the vendor, it decides to integrate it with their actual data and backend better, right? So because the chatbot cannot help you if nobody has told it how long the cashier is there, right? So there's so much opportunity to actually make these things more real time. But also, I think things go worse at the same time, that half of the companies will not integrate these AI models with more of their data and capabilities, right? So but they still have their chatbot there, and there is no number to call. Or when you call a number, you'll get the same chatbot with a voice, right? So I think for those companies who don't do it right, our experience will go worse. Just like the internet will get worse.
Yeah, that's just like today. I had to call in service on my Jaguar for the 50,000 mile service. So I called Annapolis Jaguar and I got a chatbot. And I am telling you, it was the most irritating thing because it cannot switch context.
Yep.
Because I talked to it just like it was a human. And then the worst part about it was, which I think they did simply to annoy me, some programmer decided to annoy me. Every time I said something, you heard the clacking of keys in the background. Just a moment, I'm working on that. And what should have been 2 minutes with a human wound up 10 minutes with this chatbot.
Yeah.
And that just it's annoying.
I have a scary thought for you. And I read somewhere, and Rob doesn't normally like to talk politics, but I read somewhere where the people are using things like ChatGPT to generate the text for legislation.
Yeah.
I believe it.
And now you can let you can have 2 AI lawyers talking to each other, right? And coming up with something, hallucinating a response, So it's like, so this is, I guess, maybe to summarize that is that, just like the college all the college students quickly realized, this language models, they quickly can get you 80% there, being 50% right? So depending on the topic, so you can quickly, just like, we can get the chat language model generate like the steps for a computer program that you later, fill out or ask the language model to expand. You can quickly, I mean, I'm using it. I'm paying $20 per month to OpenAI. I use it maybe once per day on average. I don't like this is not my primary tool, but so I think it can quickly get you 80% there, being between 0 or 80% right. so and then it's like, because humans also make mistakes, right? And that's where maybe to tie it together with some computer, with our world, that the obvious question is, now that language models can, generate SQL and so on, well, could I just point the language model towards my data dictionary in Oracle and tell it to rewrite all my code against MySQL? And next morning I'm running everything in MySQL and there are no problems, and now everything is very cheap. So well, it gets you 80% there with 0 to 80% accuracy, right? So if that's okay with you, depends on how complex your code is, right? So if that's okay with you, then maybe you have a point. But then there is this whole other story, that how is your application connecting to the database? If your application is using Oracle client OCI, Oracle call interface, right, to connect to Oracle, and now you suddenly dump your data into MySQL and convert SQL statements to MySQL. Well, what are you going to do with the client driver, right? So and then there's just when you have this legacy system that's been there for 25 years, there's so much complexity and variable technologies around it, inside it and around it. Then it's the SQL statement translation alone, it's not even, maybe it's 20% of the work, okay, let's say 50%, but there is so much other stuff around it, so that the language model alone is not gonna, replace, it's not gonna allow you to migrate between databases, so that easily. It gets you 80% there. It can reduce it. Instead of having to hire 100 people for 5 years, well, you can get away with 20 people for 5 years, or 100 people for 2 years, and something like that, right? But you still have to do the testing and verifications and so on. And then it can be even harder. Last point is this, because when people want to migrate away from Oracle or Teradata or something because of the cost, right? They usually want to migrate to MySQL or Postgres or something like that, because that's cheaper, right? But imagine that you have this 50-page SQL query, some report that has lived and grown over the last 20 years. Oracle can do a lot of transformations there. Oracle is capable of running outer joins with subqueries and this and that, multiple OR statements in subqueries, but some of the simpler engines, they cannot do that. So SQL translation, especially when you go from more sophisticated to simpler, towards a simpler engine, it's not only about replacing keywords, this with that, it's also about whether your target engine actually supports the complexity of your current SQL, right? Because then you quickly end up with, okay, ChatGPT, change this Oracle query to MySQL, right? It will correctly replace all the keywords, but when you try to run it, it will MySQL will tell you an error. Maybe you get a syntax error, or you rather get, hey, this complex operation is not possible. Outer joins with OR statements cannot be put into subqueries in this database engine, right? Or things like that, And then what? Then you have to start doing relational algebra yourself, and you have to manually transform your query to something that is supported, right? So, and then there is no point anymore. Like, you still have to do a lot of manual work.
All right. Yeah, you have given us a lot of information and shared some stories. I was just wondering if you had any final things that you wanted to say, or some humorous stories, war stories that occurred, when you crashed the crash. Now, Kerry says he never crashed a production database. So, and Rob has, and I have crashed production databases. So it was always interesting for our listeners to hear those kinds of stories.
Yep. Okay. So I'll leave that the question that came up. I'll leave that to the last. So we'll go with the flow, and I'll just answer the question that was asked about the Postgres and so on. I'll do that last. But yeah, screw ups. Luckily, I have not or war stories and screw ups. So I guess the first one, when I talked about the HP-UX problem, that qualifies as a war story, and the lesson learned from there would be that, if you have a complex problem, you check for a couple of usual suspects. Perhaps if it's easy to check, you can do it quickly without any risk. Check alert log or whatever. Then that's fine. It's quick and it's low risk, right? But at some point you have to get systematic. And the war story part from that story was that we had plenty of people on the phone call who wanted to keep checking for things. Hey, let's check this. Let's check that. Let's reboot. Let's fail over to another machine. They already had tried that. Let's check and try this. This is not systematic. So my part in that journey was to stay calm and say, okay, the treasure hunt dictates that now we ran some top or something, and we saw that when the problem happened, the spike, we had a 90%, 100% CPU spike spent in the kernel mode, right? And the treasure hunt dictates that now the next thing we want to look for is that, okay, let's see who is using the kernel CPU, right? So that let's drill down, let's split profile, drill down into this kernel CPU, which showed up when the problem happened, right? And I was like, hey, I don't know. I don't remember. I don't know modern HP-UX well enough. But I'm pretty sure that there must be a profiler that allows to profile what Linux kernel, what HP-UX kernel is doing, during this problem. And they talked to HP-UX support, and then indeed they found a tool, right? So there was so I didn't know what the tool was, but I knew what question I wanted to get answered next, or what I wanted to answer next, right? So that was the war story part. That and when we ran the profiler, we immediately saw it was the contention on the file name, directory entry list, and whatever, right? So I guess I finished that war story. So stay systematic. At some point you have to stop checking random things and follow the treasure hunt, right? Okay, so that's a war story just finished, but I was just looking into the mess ups. So so I have never crashed. I have never lost data, luckily. I had never crashed a production database. I have crashed the production process with Aura Debug after verifying with the user that is it okay if this batch job never finishes, batch job crashes. So that was basically the before Ash and all this stuff in Oracle 8i or something. Some batch job was stuck or something. It never finished, right? And I knew which process was running that batch job in Oracle, and to understand what was it doing, I wanted to run Aura Debug. But in the old versions, Aura Debug used to crash processes sometimes, and so my reasoning with the application people was this: hey, this batch job is stuck anyway. You're gonna kill it anyway, right? Yeah. So why not just run Aura Debug, and just in case that if it crashes, then then it's gone. Indeed, it crashed, but so the end result was the same. It crashed, but we had a stack trace. We knew where it was stuck. Aura Debug, dumped out the stack trace and process state, whatever, and then it crashed. And so we actually followed the systematic approach. We now knew where it got stuck, and then we took this info to the my Oracle support, and we found what the bug was, right? So, but I'll just tell you this one story where I did something stupid actually. So we did an upgrade of Oracle eBusiness Suite back in 2002 or 1 or something like that in Germany, when there was one company in Germany. And when you upgrade eBusiness Suite from between major versions, the upgrade process runs for hours or days, or it used to run for days even, right? And one of the reasons was that there was like a separate file for every change. You wanted to add a column, a SQL script was executed. You wanted to add another column, another script was executed. So the upgrade process executed like almost 1 million scripts or something like that, because we upgraded between these major versions. And every script, ended with a commit, or it was a DDL statement, it also had a commit, right? So anyway, because it was a major upgrade and we had downtime as well, we were given like the whole weekend to be down, so one of the most important steps is when you have downtime is to shut down the database and then do a full backup. It's like, just do the simplest possible backup, possible, right? So you shut down the database, do a full backup. Yes, it takes some time, but it's gonna be worth it. Or you could just back up archive logs as you always do, but I wanted extra simplicity, right? That now there is a zip file somewhere which is like full consistent backup, and nothing can go wrong there. So we did that, and then we ran the upgrade process, right? And then I was just sitting there on a Sunday or Saturday, and it was still, the upgrade process was slowly running the scripts and then so on. And like when I measured what the database sessions were doing, they were like 90% waiting on log file sync, right? Because every little script had a commit in them essentially, right? So, and I was just sitting there, hours go by, and I'm just looking at it, and then I couldn't stand it anymore. I was like, okay, so that I'm at least gonna put the redo log files on raw devices, because back then the file systems were not always that great with IO, right? So that Solaris and everything, and it was just a UFS file system, whatever. And I had verified before that with raw devices, redo logs on raw devices, it's indeed faster, right? Commits were actually quite much faster on that system. So, and I calculated, hey, I could save so much time by doing that, because you can do this live. You don't have to stop the database. So the upgrade was still going on, and I created 4 raw devices for redo logs. And so that things would be a little more flexible, I created 4 symlinks to point to these raw devices. And then you start just doing that. You'll just say alter database, add redo log member, this raw device, this symlink, and then alter database, add next log, and then you do a few log switches and you drop the old log files. You can do this live, right? So I've done it many times. So, and then the things went faster. It was great. I was congratulating myself. But 15 minutes later, the database crashed. Like hard crash, like or 600s or whatever. And I looked into the redo logs, and when the next log switch happened, for some reason Oracle said, hey, this is not the correct redo log file I'm going to reuse, and game over, crash.
Oops.
And what it turned out to be was that, yes, I created 4 separate raw devices, and then I created 4 symlinks with a different name, like redo 01, redo 02, whatever. But I had because I wrote the script, right there without testing. I made all these 4 symlinks point to the single raw device. So I had 4 symlinks, but they all pointed to the same actual raw device. So when and Oracle didn't complain, because when I added log files, Oracle saw 4 different symlinks. So that's fine. Oracle was not like overriding, the same file as far as Oracle knew, but they all pointed to the same raw device. So, and the moment Oracle realized that there is a log switch and I'm switching to the next log, and oops, it's actually the same log, what I'm trying to reuse. And I cannot reuse the same log what I just wrote into, because a database checkpoint has not happened, right? So this was stupid. So lesson number 1, do not make last minute changes. So if you have a process that works and you've tested it, stick to it. Lesson number 2 was that like the symlinks were a mistake. Like I didn't really need it, because these raw devices were going to be temporary anyway, only for that weekend for the migration. I could have just pointed to the raw devices and I would not have had this problem. But having these symlinks, which I set up incorrectly, that allowed this problem to happen. Because when you try to add the same path, same file name to Oracle twice, it will tell you, right? You cannot do it, right? But my symlink layer, allowed this to happen. And lesson number 3 is I did not lose any data simply because we did a full damn backup, and even without the full backup, we still had archive logs and everything. But, I wanted to have something very simple ready in case something goes wrong. So all I did was just try, once I understood what was wrong, then I just trashed the old database, restored the full backup to the point, and reran all the upgrade steps from that point. So I don't remember that. I suspect that I probably left I probably used still the raw devices, but correctly in that case, just to win some of the time back. But I did not lose any data because I, in general, in the big picture, I was using the correct, mindset. Have a trustable backup, before you do any migrations or upgrades or something like that. And that's how I didn't lose any data.
Excellent story. Good job.
Yeah, a little embarrassing, but yeah, that's the best I could come up with.
So we want to take. Do you want to have time to take the question from the?
Yeah. So I have it on the screen. So I'll just give you the gist. So basically, that as I said, you can use a systematic approach, drill down at user level. Measure things step by step. You can do it only if your underlying database engine or OS supports it, right? That's why, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you could not always be systematic. You had to be a wizard, right? And now the question is like, for example, with Postgres or, at a cloud vendor and so on, MySQL, can you use a similar approach to drill down into problems? The answer is yes. But Postgres does not have built-in Ash, even though there is a module. There is a PG Sentinel, I think it's called. It's like a Postgres plugin that gives you Ash for Postgres, right? But what I sometimes do, I just use a script to sample sys processes or whatever the Postgres view is, and you can get a little bit of Ash-like data out of there. And Amazon has DB Insights, I think, for Oracle, SQL Server, Postgres, and MySQL. I think maybe all of them. And DB Insights is a Ash-like, it's an enterprise manager-like GUI. It doesn't go as deep as Oracle does, but it gives you like the 80%. It gives you the basics, right, where you can be systematic. Kyle Haley, one of the people who worked on the original Enterprise Manager and Ash 20 years ago. Kyle Haley went to Amazon AWS at some point, and that's where he built the DB Insights, right? And Google Cloud also has a UI like that. I haven't used it myself yet, but this kind of mindset, what Oracle sort of introduced in the database world 20 years ago, this mindset has arrived elsewhere as well in the cloud vendors. But I just have to say that when you only talk to MySQL people or Postgres people, then to me it seems that they're still stuck in where Oracle people were in 2002. 2002, people in Oracle world, they spoke about buffer cache hit ratio a lot, things like that, which were not, which were utilization averages. And today, when I go to a MySQL conference or play some videos, I see a bit of the same, that people talk about ratios and then things like that, avoiding full label scans and stuff like that. So let me pitch something. The last part of the question is that is just if you have something like Postgres running in your machine, is running top the only option? Top can be the easy, the OS level. It can be the easy tool because it's easy to use and it's there. But if you want to go deeper a little, then code you 0x.tools. I'm actually, I can type it in, right? So this is my website, actually. I mean, this is maybe some further reading, and I have a video on my on my blog as well. Just go to my blog. Actually, let me just go to yeah, just I have a bunch of YouTube videos about both Oracle and also Linux world, and I do explain how I have a so basically the session level Oracle Ash like mindset. I have built something like that for Linux or apps running on Linux, right? So that you can actually, instead of reporting what are the top processes, or sorry, instead of reporting what are the top sessions and wait events, I can report what are the top processes or threads and what system calls they're stuck in and so on, right? So I plan to build this much further, but I'm not there yet. So that's some further reading for you.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that.
All right. So let's see.
Tanel?
Only half an hour over time. So that's usually my 1 hour sessions end up being 3 hours, and it's also like a joke that this is a 1 hour hacking session that will take 3 hours.
So yeah, well, you're not like Connor McDonald, who shows 500 slides in a 1 hour talk.
Yeah, and I have, just to be honest, and like what is it? To admit this, I gave up maybe 10 years or 10 plus years. I actually even gave up trying to stay on course. It's I think that's how my brain works. I just get excited on the stage, sometimes go into the weeds, and that's actually one reason why I nowadays prefer video-based training material and whatever, because then I'm actually doing the job as planned. But when I'm on stage, I mean, sometimes I only delivered half of the talk because and I was interested. I found something new and people were interested. But I did try it at some point, and it gave me a little more stress. And then I just gave up. I'm just gonna show up and talk about whatever. So no promises.
Yeah. So do you have any conferences coming up presenting?
So there is actually it's not an Oracle one, but it's called the P99.conf. So let me just look up the website. P99conf.io. So it's a free conference. It's a 2-day free event. And let me see if they've listed. No, I have accepted to talk there, but I'm not listed there yet, I think. So that's in October, and so that's it's not an Oracle talk, and it's also like so basically it's organized by people who build something called SkillaDB or something like that. So you'll see that when you go there, and that's like a clone for well, it's a database. It's a highly scalable but also low latency database. It's like a NoSQL like database, but the conference is about similar topics. How do you run big things at scale, but also at also maintain consistent latency. So that's an interesting topic. So how can you always measure and stay on top of your performance and avoid even small hiccups? So if you're interested in like Linux and database internals in general and so on, that's a free event where to go, right? So but as far as other conferences, I try to like take it a little easier nowadays. I may show up at Open World or something like that, but only for the previous weekend and drink beer with people. And when the whole thing starts, then I'll probably go away. So I still enjoy the part of meeting people, especially after all the pandemic and so on. But delivering talks, I think I'll just keep doing things online. And so check out my videos as well in my blog, like I listed. And of course, don't forget to check out my training sessions as well, because I have a whole new learning platform nowadays.
Excellent, excellent, good.
Thank you very much, Tanel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
This has been enlightening.
Thank you.
Yeah, hopefully it's useful as well. And Yeah. So who's the next speaker? Do you know yet? Or who's the next guest in your
We have Rick Van Dyke coming up,
okay, I know Rick. Yeah.
and I think that's May 5th. And we have a few others lined up, but no date commitments yet. We didn't want to get too far ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
sure Rick has some good SQL shooting war stories and so on.
Exactly.
Oh, I'm sure he does.
All right, very good. Thanks again.
Thank you,
Okay, thank you
Tanel.
very
Listen,
much.
have a great one. Enjoy Miami.
I will. I do. And I will.
All right, take care.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.
All right.